"What the hell?" Donovan Blackwood snarled, turning to see the face of the waiter, an absolute nobody who was now physically restraining him. The fork, loaded with praline cream and a heavy dusting of crushed walnuts, had stopped a single inch from the boy's lips. A hand, steady and sure, had shot out from nowhere and wrapped around the wrist of the man holding it. Landon Grant, the waiter, ignored the raw fury in the billionaire's eyes. His grip was firm but professional as he gently but inexorably lowered Donovan's hand. He took the fork, his expression unreadable. "My apologies, sir," Landon said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the shocked silence that had fallen over the table. "The chef has prepared a special nut-free sorbet for the young gentleman. On the house." For a moment, no one moved. Genevieve Davenport stared, her mind struggling to process the scene. Her waiter, her invisible, subservient waiter, had just physically interfered with her guest in the middle of a billion-dollar negotiation. Across from her 8-year-old nephew, Cody, looked terrified, his eyes wide as he stared at the forbidden dessert. Donovan was the first to recover. He ripped his wrist from Landon's light grasp, his face contorting with rage. "Who in God's name do you think you are?" he bellowed, shoving his chair back. Diners at nearby tables flinched, their hushed conversations dying. "You put your hands on me? You interrupt my meal? I'll have you fired. I'll have this whole restaurant shut down." The restaurant manager was already scurrying toward them, his face a mask of panic. But Genevieve's focus was a laser beam of cold fury aimed at Landon. She saw her deal, the culmination of 6 months of ruthless strategy, evaporating in a cloud of public humiliation. This waiter, this insignificant cog in the machine, had just cost her everything. The reason didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the catastrophic result. She stood up, her movement sharp and deliberate. "What is your name?" she demanded, her voice low and lethal. "Landon Grant, ma'am," he replied, finally turning his gaze to her. He saw no mercy in her eyes, only ice. "Philip," she snapped to the approaching manager, not taking her eyes off Landon. "This man is to be removed from the premises immediately. He is fired." "Ma'am, please," Landon started, desperate to make her understand. "The boy." "Do not speak to me," Genevieve commanded, her voice slicing through his. The sheer force of her authority was a physical thing. "You are done here. You have insulted my guest, sabotaged a private business meeting, and put your hands on a client. You are lucky that is the only consequence you will face tonight." She turned to the manager. "Escort him out." Now Philip, the manager, looked helplessly at Landon, a man he had shared friendly chats with in the break room for 3 years. But he knew who signed the checks and who frequented the restaurant. He put a firm hand on Landon's shoulder. "Landon, let's go." The walk of shame from the main dining room to the kitchen felt a mile long. Landon could feel the stares of every diner, every busboy, every member of the staff. He had just been publicly crucified. His mind was a chaotic whirl of panic. His job was gone. Mia's medication, the rent, the electric bill, it all flashed before his eyes. All because he had done the right thing. As the kitchen doors swung shut behind him, cutting off the opulent calm of the dining room, the last thing he saw was Genevieve Davenport standing tall and immovable, the unquestioned queen in her kingdom, having just ordered an execution without a second thought. Back at the table, Genevieve turned to Donovan, her composure a fragile paper-thin veneer over a core of white-hot rage. "Donovan, I cannot apologize enough for that incident. Please, let's not allow the actions of an incompetent employee to derail our progress." Donovan laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "An incompetent employee? Genevieve, that was a Category 5 disaster, and it happened on your watch." He picked up his briefcase, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. He had been looking for a way out of her punishing terms, and this waiter had just handed it to him on a silver platter. "The deal is off. It's clear to me you're not in control of your own house. Good luck with your next target." He gave a mock salute and strode away, leaving Genevieve standing alone in the wreckage of her evening. She sank back into her chair, the adrenaline leaving her feeling hollow and shaky. The deal was dead. A powerful enemy was gloating. And it was all because of him, the waiter, Landon Grant. She would remember that name. She would make sure he never worked in this city again. It was only then that she noticed the silence from across the table. Cody was staring at the slice of praline torte, his face pale and his small body trembling. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "What is wrong with you?" she snapped, her frustration and anger spilling over onto the only available target. "This is your fault. If you hadn't been here..." Cody flinched back as if she had struck him. He pulled his arm defensively across his chest, and the movement caused the sleeve of his tailored jacket to slide up his forearm. And there, on his thin wrist, was a small silver chain, a medical alert bracelet. Genevieve's eyes snagged on it. Time seemed to stop. She leaned forward, her heart starting to pound a slow, heavy drumbeat against her ribs. She could see the tiny engraving of the medical caduceus symbol. And beneath it, 2 words: severe nut allergy. The world tilted. The air left her lungs. Her mind replayed the last 10 minutes in a sickening, high-speed blur. The praline torte, the crushed walnuts sprinkled on top, Donovan holding out the fork. "Here you go, kid." And then, the waiter, his sudden appearance, his calm, firm intervention, his words. "The chef has prepared a special nut-free sorbet." He hadn't been a lunatic. He hadn't been overstepping. He knew. He had seen a danger that she, in her blind ambition, had been completely oblivious to. He wasn't a villain who had ruined her life. He was a hero who had just saved her nephews, and she had fired him. She had destroyed his career, his livelihood, in front of a room full of people for doing it. The shame was a physical blow, so powerful it knocked the wind out of her. It was a vile, acidic feeling that clawed its way up her throat. She looked at her nephew, this small, sad boy her sister had entrusted to her, and felt a wave of self-loathing so profound it made her dizzy. She had almost let him die, and she had punished the one person who had prevented it. Her entire life was built on making the right call, on seeing the angles, on understanding the truth of a situation. And she had never, ever been more wrong. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone, her fingers fumbling on the screen. She called her driver. "Get the car. Bring it to the front." Now she stood up, her legs unsteady. The restaurant manager was still hovering nearby, wringing his hands. "The waiter," she said, her voice a raw, strangled thing she barely recognized as her own. "Landon Grant. I need his address. I need it right now." Landon Grant walked home. He didn't take the bus. He needed the biting night air in his lungs and the hard, unforgiving pavement under his feet to keep the panic from swallowing him whole. With each step, the word "fired" echoed in his mind, a brutal rhythm keeping time with his frantic heartbeat. It wasn't the loss of the job that terrified him. Not really. It was the thought of Mia, his 6-year-old daughter, her smile, the cost of her life-saving allergy medication, the rent on their small, safe apartment. He was her entire world, her only protector, and he had just failed her. By the time he reached his tired-looking brick building, the anger and humiliation had burned away, leaving only the cold, heavy ash of dread. He paused at the door, taking a moment to arrange his face into a mask of normalcy. He could not let her see his fear. Miles away, in a penthouse that glittered like a diamond shard against the night sky, Donovan Blackwood was also thinking about Landon Grant. The humiliation at the restaurant burned hotter than any failed business deal. He picked up his phone and dialed a secure number. "It's me," he snarled when the call was answered. "The waiter from the Gilded Sparrow, Landon Grant. I want his life. I want you to find out what he cares about, and then I want you to help me take it away from him." He listened for a moment. Then a cruel smile touched his lips. "Good. Spare no expense." He hung up, the feeling of control beginning to soothe his wounded pride. The restaurant manager, Philip, handed Genevieve the slip of paper with Landon's address on it as if it were a lit fuse. She snatched it and strode out to her waiting Rolls-Royce without a word. As the car pulled silently away from the curb, she stared at the address, the letters blurring through the film of shame in her eyes. The drive was a journey through her own personal hell. Every traffic light, every passing storefront, was a fresh screen for her mind to replay the scene. Landon's calm intervention, her own blind, arrogant fury, the look of quiet devastation on his face as he was led away. She had acted as a tyrant, passing a devastating sentence on a man who had done nothing but protect her own family. The scenery outside the tinted windows shifted, the gleaming towers of the financial district giving way to lower, grittier buildings. Soon, the Rolls-Royce turned onto a street lined with aging cars and apartments with weary, watchful windows. It glided to a stop, its silent, powerful engine a stark contrast to the distant city sounds. Her car, a $500,000 symbol of her world, looked absurd here, an alien vessel that had landed in a forgotten land. For a moment, she was paralyzed by a fear she'd never known. Not the fear of a hostile takeover, but the fear of facing the consequences of her own monstrous actions. Steeling herself, she opened the door and stepped out. The hallway of the building smelled of old carpets and disinfectant. She found apartment 1B and raised her hand to knock, her knuckles hesitating an inch from the peeling paint. What could she possibly say that would undo the damage she had done? Taking a shaky breath, she knocked, the sound soft and uncertain. The door opened a few inches. Landon Grant stood there, his face pale and drawn. When he saw her, his expression hardened from exhaustion into a mask of cold, wary anger. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice low. He kept his hand on the door, ready to slam it shut. "Come to make sure I'm sufficiently ruined?" "Don't worry, you did a great job." His words were a gut punch. She deserved them. She deserved worse. "No," she said, her own voice barely a whisper. I came to—" She struggled with the words, as if they were a foreign language she had never spoken before. "I came to apologize." Landon stared at her, his anger momentarily replaced by disbelief. "I saw his bracelet," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "After you left. The medical alert bracelet. For his nut allergy." She took a shaky breath. "You weren't interfering. You were saving his life, and I fired you for it." She looked him straight in the eye, letting him see the raw, agonizing shame she felt. "There's no excuse. What I did was unforgivable. I was arrogant and cruel, and I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. I am so sorry." He leaned against the doorframe, the fight seeming to drain out of him, replaced by a weary sort of disbelief. He had spent the last hour imagining this woman as a monster, and here she was, all but begging on his doorstep. "I want to fix this," she said, her voice regaining a sliver of its usual command as she shifted into the familiar territory of problem-solving. "I've already called the restaurant. Your job is reinstated with back pay and a promotion, or forget that. I'll hire you myself, my personal staff. Name the position, and I want to compensate you for the humiliation, the distress. I'll write you a check right now." She reached into her purse, her movements becoming brisk, efficient. She was trying to fix a catastrophic human error the way she would fix a bad investment, by throwing money at it. "Just name your price, Mr. Grant. Whatever it is, I'll pay it." Landon looked from her expensive purse to her desperate eyes. Then he thought of his daughter, Mia, sleeping peacefully in the other room, blissfully unaware that her father's world had been shattered and then bizarrely pieced back together in the span of a few hours. He thought of the principle he was trying to teach her: to be kind, to do the right thing, even when it's hard. "It wasn't about a price," he said quietly. The hardness was gone from his voice, replaced by something she couldn't quite decipher. It sounded like disappointment. He was a kid. He was in danger. That's it. That's the whole story. He looked at her, at the symbol of her world parked at his curb, and made a decision. I don't want your money, Miss Davenport. And I don't want your job. He started to close the door. Thank you for the apology. It means something, but I think you should go now. The lock clicked shut, leaving Genevieve standing alone in the dim hallway, the checkbook still in her hand. For the first time in her adult life, she had encountered a problem her money couldn't solve. Genevieve sat alone in the silent, moving fortress of her car, the click of Landon's lock echoing in her mind. Her driver, Thomas, navigated the city with quiet competence, occasionally glancing at her in the rearview mirror. After a long, heavy silence, he spoke, his voice carefully neutral. Not everyone has a price, ma'am. Sometimes, all people have is their pride. The simple observation struck Genevieve harder than any boardroom insult. He was right. She had tried to settle a matter of human decency with a business transaction, and her offer had been seen for the insult it was. She rode the rest of the way home in silence, the towering, glittering buildings of her city sliding past the window. When she arrived at her penthouse, a vast, minimalist space of glass and steel, overlooking the entire metropolis, it had never felt so cold or so empty. She had a fortune that could buy empires, but she couldn't buy forgiveness from a man who lived in a 3-room apartment. The powerlessness of it was a new and terrifying feeling. The next morning, Landon woke up to the heavy reality of being unemployed. The immediate pressure of bills and providing for Mia was a physical weight on his chest. He had to find a job. Today. Guess what, Mia monster? He said with a cheerfulness that felt like a betrayal. Daddy's going on a new adventure today. I'm going to go look for a new super cool job. Mia, her face bright with excitement, clapped her hands. A new job? Like an astronaut? Maybe not an astronaut, he chuckled, his heart aching at the lie. But something great. I promise. After dropping her off at school with a hug that felt a little too tight, the performance was over. His adventure began. He spent the day walking the city, his only decent shirt and tie feeling more like a costume with each passing hour. The story was the same everywhere he went. He would get a hopeful nod from a manager who knew his reputation, only to see their face close up the moment he mentioned he'd just left the Gilded Sparrow. By noon, he knew the truth. The news of his public firing, likely twisted into a story of an unhinged employee, had spread through the tight-knit restaurant community like a virus. Donovan Blackwood's influence was a poison, and Landon Grant was now untouchable. By late afternoon, his feet ached, and the hope he'd started the day with had shriveled into a hard, bitter knot in his stomach. In her sterile, glass-walled office, Genevieve couldn't focus. The numbers on her screen blurred together. Her mind kept circling back to Landon's apartment, to his quiet, principled dismissal. She had failed. Her first, best volley of power and money had been swatted away like an annoying fly. She realized she had approached the problem all wrong. She hadn't tried to understand the man. She had just tried to buy him. To solve this, she needed better data. "Jessica," she said into her intercom, her voice sharp, "get me everything you can on a man named Landon Grant. I want it discreet. No official channels. I want his history, his family, everything, and I want it on my desk in an hour." Her assistant, the best in the business, delivered. The file was thin, but what it contained changed everything. Landon Grant, widower, wife Elena died of cancer 5 years prior. No criminal record. One daughter, Mia Grant, age 6. And then, the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. A printout from an old, obscure medical fundraising page. Mia Grant suffered from a rare and severe form of food protein-induced enterocolitis syndrome. She had life-threatening allergies to nuts, dairy, soy, and eggs. Genevieve stared at the page, a lightning strike of clarity. Landon hadn't just been protecting a random child at the restaurant. He had been acting on a deeply ingrained paternal instinct honed by years of protecting his own daughter from the exact same threat. He saw a child in danger and acted, because that was who he was. His entire life was a testament to a kind of quiet, fierce protectiveness she had never known. A new idea began to form, a new strategy. She hadn't been wrong to want to help. She had just chosen the wrong weapon. Offering him a check was an insult because it implied his integrity was for sale. But what if she targeted the problem itself? What if she made an offer that aligned with his values instead of her own? She buzzed her assistant again. "Get me the head of the Davenport Foundation on the line." Now, 5 minutes later, she was speaking to the director of her company's charitable arm. "I'm establishing a new grant," she said, her voice firm, all business once again. "I want this to be a real, impactful thing. Not just a press release. It will focus on funding research for rare and complex pediatric food allergies. Find me the top 3 research hospitals in the country working on this and get me proposals by the end of the week. And I want to name it the Mia Grant." After she hung up, a sense of purpose settled over her for the first time since that night. This felt right. It wasn't a bribe, it was an action. It respected his principles. But it wasn't enough. It was an indirect, impersonal gesture. She owed him a direct one. She thought for a long time, then composed a short, formal email, sending it to the address listed on his old employee file, hoping he still used it. "Mr. Grant, I understand and respect your decision. My offer was clumsy and transactional, and I apologize for that as well. However, I still feel a profound need to make amends in a way that you might find acceptable. I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you one more time. Not about a job or money, but about a more meaningful solution. Please let me know if you would be willing to meet. Sincerely, Genevieve Davenport." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. That evening, Landon returned to his apartment feeling lower than he had in years. The weight of his failure was a physical thing, pressing down on his shoulders. He felt like he had let Mia down, that his one act of principle was going to cost her everything. He sat down at his small desk and opened his laptop to check his email, hoping for a miracle from one of the online applications he'd sent. There were only rejections. And then he saw it, an email with the subject line, "From the office of Genevieve Davenport." His first instinct was to delete it without reading, to cut this woman and her chaotic world out of his life for good. But the quiet desperation of his situation, the image of Mia's trusting face, stayed his hand. With a deep sense of foreboding, he clicked it open. He read the short, carefully worded message once, then twice. A more meaningful solution. What did that even mean? His pride, wounded and raw, screamed at him to ignore it, to throw her second chance back in her face, just as she had thrown him out of her restaurant. But the fear, the cold, pragmatic fear of a father with no way to provide for his child, whispered a different counsel. What if she was sincere? What if this was the only lifeline he was going to get? He sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, caught between the devil of his pride and the deep blue sea of his responsibility. For 2 days, the email sat in Landon's inbox, a digital time bomb. He spent those 48 hours in a grinding, hopeless cycle, dropping Mia at school with a smile, spending the day facing the cold indifference of a city that had no place for him, and picking her up with the same forced cheerfulness. The stack of unpaid bills on his small kitchen counter seemed to grow taller, mocking him. His pride was a luxury he was quickly realizing he could no longer afford. On the 3rd morning after a night spent staring at the ceiling, he made a decision. He wasn't just responsible for his own pride, he was responsible for Mia's future. He opened his laptop, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He would accept her meeting, but it would be on his terms. Neutral ground. No power plays. "Miss Davenport, I will meet you. There is a coffee shop called The Daily Grind on Archer Street. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. I can give you 20 minutes. Landon Grant." He hit send before he could lose his nerve. The reply came back in less than a minute. "I will be there." "He's clean." The voice on the phone was gravelly, bored. The private investigator Donovan had hired was efficient, but uninspired. Landon Grant. No criminal record, not even a parking ticket. Wife died of cancer 5 years ago. He works, he takes care of his kid. No gambling, no mistress, no secret drug habit. The guy's a Boy Scout. Donovan stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, staring down at the city lights. A Boy Scout, he repeated, his voice a low snarl. Saints were the hardest to crucify. No, everybody has a flaw. Everybody has a weakness. What's his? The kid, the investigator said without hesitation. Mia Grant, age 6. He'd walk through fire for her. From what I can tell, she's his whole world. A slow, venomous smile spread across Donovan's face. The kid, he echoed softly. Of course. That's the leverage. He took a sip of his scotch. I don't need dirt. I need a narrative. Go to her school, talk to the other parents, be discreet, start planting seeds. I want whispers that the man is unstable, prone to outbursts, a little too intense. Let's see how the perfect father looks when the whole playground is watching him. The daily grind was a small, unassuming place, with worn wooden floors and the rich smell of roasted coffee beans. Genevieve was there 10 minutes early, sitting at a small table in the corner. She looked profoundly out of place, a sleek panther that had wandered into a petting zoo. She deliberately dressed down in a simple cashmere sweater and slacks, but she still radiated an aura of wealth and power that made the other patrons give her a wide berth. Landon walked in at exactly 10 a.m. He saw her immediately, and his stomach tightened. He walked to the counter, ordered a black coffee, paid for it in cash, and then sat down opposite her. He didn't say hello. He just looked at her, his expression guarded. You have 20 minutes. Genevieve nodded, accepting his terms. She didn't start with an offer. She started with the truth. I did some research after I left your apartment, she began, her voice steady. About your daughter. Her specific allergy. Landon's eyes narrowed. You leave my daughter out of this. I'm not trying to involve her, Genevieve said quickly, raising a hand. I'm trying to explain. I found an old fundraising page. I read about her condition, the hospital stays, the cost of her medication. She took a breath. So yesterday, I established a foundation. A new grant, funded by my company. It's called the Mia Grant for Pediatric Allergy Research. I've endowed it with $5 million to fund research into rare and complex conditions, just like hers. Landon stared at her, his coffee forgotten. He felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. He had expected a job offer, a check, another clumsy attempt to buy his forgiveness. He had not expected this, a $5 million research grant. In his daughter's name. It was an act of such staggering scale and thoughtfulness that it completely bypassed all of his defenses. Why? He finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse. Why would you do that? This was the moment. The transactional explanation was easy. The real one was hard. My father started his first company 30 years ago, she said, her gaze drifting to the window. He did it because he had just lost his son. My younger brother. He died at age 4 from an illness that today is completely treatable. My father built an empire on the idea that no parent should have to go through what he did. She turned her eyes back to Landon, and he saw a flicker of a pain so old and deep it was almost part of her DNA. I took over the company, and I made it bigger and richer, but I forgot why he started it. It all just became about winning. She looked down at her hands. What happened at the restaurant? What almost happened to Cody? It was a wake-up call. You reminded me of what my family's legacy was supposed to be about. The grant isn't for you, Mr. Grant. It's for me. It's my way of finding my way back. Landon was silent for a long time. He looked at this woman, this corporate titan who had seemed so monstrous just a few days ago, and saw someone else entirely. His anger, the hard knot of it that had been sitting in his chest, finally began to dissolve. The foundation, she continued, leaning forward slightly, is now in charge of administering this grant. We need to build a bridge between the scientists and the families. We need someone who can consult with the researchers, who can speak to the parent communities, who can ensure that the $5 million is being used to address the real-world needs of families dealing with these conditions every single day. She looked him directly in the eye. We need someone with first-hand experience, someone who understands the fear and the logistics, someone with integrity who can't be bought." She slid a folder across the table. "I'm not offering you a handout, Landon. I'm offering you a job. Parent advocate and senior consultant for the MIA grant. It comes with a full salary, benefits, and the power to make a real difference in the lives of thousands of children." Landon looked down at the folder, then back up at her face. It was a perfect solution. It was a lifeline that didn't feel like charity. It was a job that had meaning, a purpose born from his own pain. He felt a sudden, inexplicable chill, a flicker of premonition that stepping into her world could be dangerous, but the quiet desperation of the last few days was a more immediate threat. He opened the folder. Inside was a formal job description and a proposed starting salary that was more than he had made in the last 3 years combined. It was a way out. It was a miracle. He closed the folder and pushed it back toward her slightly. He took a deep breath. "I'll do it," he said, his voice clear and steady. "I accept." A quiet, shaky exhale escaped Genevieve's lips. It was a sound of profound relief. "Good," she said. "That's very good." She extended her hand across the table. "Welcome aboard, mister." Grant Landon took her hand. Her grip was firm, her hand surprisingly warm. It wasn't a handshake between a boss and a new employee. It felt like an alliance, a pact made between two survivors. As they let go, a sense of hope, real and fragile, began to dawn in Landon's chest. He had a future again. He didn't know that miles away, a man in a gray van was already parking across the street from his daughter's school, beginning a new, far more dangerous chapter of their lives. Landon's first day at the Davenport Foundation felt like stepping onto another planet. The elevator that whisked him up to the 38th floor was a silent, glass and steel capsule, and as his modest neighborhood shrank below, he felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. He walked into the Foundation's serene, art-filled offices wearing his best and only suit, which suddenly felt cheap and ill-fitting. He was a waiter who, less than a week ago, had been serving coffee to people who lived and worked in buildings like this. The feeling of being an imposter was a heavy cloak on his shoulders. He was given a beautiful office with a large oak desk and a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a breathtaking view of the city. A woman named Clara, the director of the foundation, greeted him warmly and walked him through the grant proposals. Seeing the MIA grant printed in crisp, official lettering on the documents made it real. He spent the day reading, his focus intense. The fear of failure was a powerful motivator, but something else began to emerge as he read, a sense of purpose. He wasn't a scientist, but he was an expert in the reality of this life. He knew the terror of a reaction, the exhaustion of constant vigilance. He was already making notes, questions for the researchers that a scientist might never think to ask. A few days later, in a video conference with a team from a prestigious Boston hospital, he listened to a lead scientist explain a complex trial protocol for a new therapy. "Your control group is using a standard placebo," Landon said, speaking up for the first time, his voice nervous but firm. "But for parents of kids with severe allergies, our entire lives are the control group. We don't just avoid the allergen. We avoid any food made in the same facility. Your protocol doesn't account for that real-world variable. It could skew your results." There was a stunned silence on the call, followed by the lead scientist murmuring, "My God, he's right." Landon felt a surge of confidence. Maybe he did belong here after all. Outside the cheerful red brick entrance of Northwood Elementary School, Donovan's investigator, Ray, sat on a bench, looking like any other parent waiting for pickup. He struck up a conversation with a woman he had identified as the school's most notorious gossip. "It's a great school," she was saying. "We just love it here." "Oh, it seems wonderful," Ray said, putting on a worried frown. "It's just, I was at that fancy restaurant, the Gilded Sparrow, the other night. I saw one of the dads from this school, a waiter named Grant, I think. He just exploded at a customer, screaming, grabbing. They had to drag him out. It was honestly pretty scary." He shook his head. "I'm sure he's a perfectly nice guy, but seeing that kind of temper, It just makes you worry, you know? Especially around kids. The woman's eyes widened, a hungry, speculative glint appearing in them. Landon Grant? Really? Oh my, that is concerning. Probably nothing, Ray said, standing up as if to leave. I just thought, as a parent, you'd want to know. The seed, carefully cultivated and poisonous, had been planted. At the end of Landon's first week, Genevieve's assistant requested he come to her office on the 40th floor for a progress report. The elevator ride still felt like an ascent into the heavens, but this time he carried a briefcase full of his own notes. Landon, she said, gesturing for him to sit. The formal Mr. Grant was gone. Clara tells me you've been a revelation. I'm just trying to help, he said, pushing a folder across her massive desk. I've reviewed the proposal from Johns Hopkins. Their methodology is brilliant, but I think they have a blind spot. I made some notes. Genevieve opened the folder, her eyebrows raising in surprise as she read his detailed, insightful comments. This is excellent, she said, genuinely impressed. An awkward, yet comfortable silence fell between them. The professional part of the meeting was over, leaving only the personal. How's Cody? Landon asked quietly. Genevieve sighed, the CEO mask falling away for a moment. He's quiet. He spends most of his time in his room playing video games. I try to talk to him, but I feel like I'm speaking a different language. Landon thought of the long, silent months after his wife, Elena, had died. How he and a grief-stricken Mia had just existed in the same space, unable to connect. Kids don't always need you to talk, he said softly, offering the advice as an equal, not an employee. Sometimes they just need you to be there. Sit with him while he plays his games. You don't have to understand it. Just bring a book or your laptop and sit in the same room. Let him know he's not alone in his world. Genevieve looked at him, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. He had just handed her a simple, practical key to a door she hadn't known how to open. Their roles had completely reversed. Here, in the heart of her empire, he was the one with the expertise she desperately needed. The ground between them was finally, truly level. Thank you, she said, and this time it held none of the desperation of her apology, only sincere appreciation. I'll try that. The meeting ended on that hopeful note. For the first time, Landon felt like this could actually work. They could be partners in this strange new venture. He walked out of her office feeling lighter than he had all week, a genuine smile on his face. This new life, this impossible second chance, was real. He was heading for the elevator, his mind already on the weekend he would spend with Mia, when his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but the caller ID read Northwood Elementary. He answered, expecting a call from the school nurse about a scraped knee. Mr. Grant? It was the principal, Mrs. Davison. Her voice was strained, overly formal. Yes, Mrs. Davison, is everything okay with Mia? Mia is fine, Mr. Grant, but I need you to come in tomorrow morning before classes start. There's something sensitive we need to discuss. A cold knot of dread formed in Landon's stomach. Sensitive? What is it? There was a hesitant pause on the other end of the line, a sound that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Mr. Grant, someone from the Department of Child and Family Services has been in contact with us. They've received an anonymous report concerning Mia's welfare. The words hit Landon with the force of a physical blow. Child Protective Services. The sleek, opulent hallway of the Davenport Tower suddenly felt like it was closing in on him, the air thick and unbreathable. He mumbled a goodbye to the principal and ended the call, his hand trembling as he lowered the phone. His mind, which moments before had been filled with grant proposals and a newfound sense of purpose, was now a whiteout of pure terror. An anonymous report. It was a phantom accusation, a ghost he couldn't fight because he couldn't see it. He stumbled into the elevator, barely registering the other passengers, his face pale. All he could think about was Mia, his bright, happy, innocent daughter. Someone was trying to use her as a weapon. Someone was trying to take her away from him. The journey home was a blur. He greeted Mia with a hug that was a little too desperate. a smile that felt brittle enough to shatter. He went through the motions of their evening, dinner, homework, a bedtime story, but his mind was 1,000 miles away, trapped in a dark room filled with worst-case scenarios. He lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling. The quiet, steady sound of Mia's breathing from the next room, the only thing that kept him from coming completely undone. The next morning, he stood outside the principal's office, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had worn his suit again, trying desperately to project an image of stability and competence, but he felt like a fraud. He felt like a cornered animal. Mrs. Davison, the principal, greeted him with a tight, professional smile that didn't reach her worried eyes. Sitting beside her desk was another woman, dressed in a plain but neat pantsuit. She had a calm, unreadable expression. "Mr. Grant, this is Miss Albright from the Department of Child and Family Services," the principal said. "Mr. Grant," Ms. Albright said, her voice even and firm. She did not offer to shake his hand. "Thank you for coming in. As Mrs. Davison told you, we've received a report expressing some concerns. I'd like to ask you a few questions." Landon's throat was dry. "What concerns? Who made this report?" "The reporter is anonymous, as is often the case," Ms. Albright said, opening a file. "The report alleges a recent incident of public aggression on your part. It also contains statements from other concerned parties regarding a potentially volatile home environment for your daughter, the rumors, the whispers Donovan's man had planted. They were being presented as corroborating evidence." "That's a lie," Landon said, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's a complete distortion of what happened at the restaurant." "I was protecting a child." Miss Albright listened patiently, making notes. Her face betrayed nothing. "So you were, in fact, terminated from your job following what you describe as a confrontation with a customer?" "Yes, but it wasn't my fault," Landon said, his voice rising in frustration. "I was doing the right thing." "According to the report," Ms. Albright continued, her eyes on her file, "the incident was severe enough for immediate dismissal. That suggests a level of conflict that we are required to take seriously." She looked up at him, her gaze clinical. "We have to investigate all credible reports, Mr. Grant, for the child's safety. That is my only priority." He felt the trap closing around him. The truth didn't matter. Only the official version, the twisted narrative that was now in a government file, mattered. "As part of our standard procedure," Ms. Albright said, "I will need to conduct a home visit this afternoon. I will also need to interview Mia Landon's blood ran cold." "You want to talk to my daughter?" "Yes. It's important to hear her perspective on her home life." A chill went down his spine as she added, "I'll need to speak with her alone, of course." The thought of this stranger, this dispassionate government agent, questioning his 6-year-old daughter, planting seeds of doubt and fear in her mind, was more than he could bear. He felt a wave of helpless rage. This was a nightmare, a carefully constructed, perfectly executed nightmare. He left the school in a daze, the social worker's words echoing in his ears. Home visit this afternoon. He sat in his car in the school parking lot, his hands clenched on the steering wheel, his mind racing. Anonymous report, volatile home environment, interviewing Maya. It was all so calculated, so cruel. And then, with sickening clarity, he knew. This wasn't random. This wasn't some gossiping parent at the school. This had the feel of real power, of money and influence being used to twist the system. It was Donovan Blackwood. It had to be. This was his revenge. It wasn't enough to get him fired, to blacklist him. Donovan was coming for the only thing Landon had ever truly cared about. He was coming for Mia. The sheer evil of it left him breathless. He was fighting a vindictive billionaire who could hire lawyers and investigators, who could manufacture lies and whisper them into the right ears. What did Landon have? A new job that he hadn't even been at for a week, and the truth, which, as he had just learned, was a worthless currency in this fight. He felt utterly, hopelessly alone. And then he thought of the other person who had been at that table, the other person who knew the truth, the other person who had the power to fight a man like Donovan. His pride. The stubborn, foolish pride that had made him want to handle his own problems felt like a distant, childish luxury now. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about protecting his daughter. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over Genevieve's contact information. Making this call felt like a surrender, an admission that he was out of his depth, that he was too weak to protect his own family. But not making it was unthinkable. He pressed the call button. She answered immediately. "Landon? Is everything okay?" "No," he said, his voice cracking, all pretense of strength gone. "Genevieve, I need your help." He explained everything, the words tumbling out in a frantic, desperate rush. The principal's call, the meeting with CPS, the anonymous report twisting the truth of the restaurant, the threat of them interviewing Mia alone. There was a moment of absolute silence on the other end of the line. When Genevieve's voice came back, it was completely changed. The warmth and vulnerability he had heard in the coffee shop were gone, replaced by something cold, hard, and terrifyingly focused. It was the voice of the CEO who dismantled corporations for a living. "Donovan," she said. The name was not a question. It was a verdict. "I think so," Landon whispered. "I know so," she corrected him, her voice like ice. "Listen to me, Landon. Do not speak to Miss Albright again. Do not agree to the home visit. Do not let her anywhere near Mia. If she calls, you tell her that your legal counsel will be in touch to schedule any further meetings. Do you understand?" "Legal counsel? I can't afford a lawyer, Genevieve." "You don't have to," she said, her voice sharp and absolute. "I'm handling this. My personal legal team will be at your apartment in 1 hour. They are the best in the city. They have never lost a case. They will not lose this one." Landon was too stunned to speak. "He made a mistake, Landon," Genevieve said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous pitch. "A fatal one. He came after your child to get to me. He thinks he's fighting a down-on-his-luck waiter." She paused. "He has no idea what a war he just started." Landon hung up the phone, his body trembling with a strange mixture of terror and a fragile, unfamiliar hope. He was a pawn in a game he didn't understand, but for the first time, he felt like he wasn't on the board alone. He had the queen on his side. He spent the next hour pacing his small living room, cleaning things that were already clean, his mind a frantic mess. He rehearsed what he would say to the lawyers, trying to sound calm and rational, but his thoughts kept circling back to the image of Ms. Albright questioning Mia. Exactly 58 minutes after Genevieve's call, there was a sharp, professional knock on his door. He opened it to find 2 people who looked like they had stepped out of a magazine about corporate law. The woman in front was in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes, an immaculate gray suit, and an air of unshakable competence. The younger man beside her was just as polished, holding a sleek leather briefcase. "Mr. Grant," the woman said, her voice crisp and direct. "I am Evelyn Reed. This is my associate, Mr. Davies." Miss Davenport sent us. Landon was so taken aback by their presence in his humble hallway that he could only nod and step aside to let them in. They entered his apartment, their eyes sweeping over the space not with judgment, but with a kind of rapid, professional assessment. "Please sit down," Landon said, gesturing to his worn-out sofa. "Thank you," Evelyn said, though she remained standing. "We don't have much time. I need you to tell us everything, Mr. Grant. Start with the restaurant. Do not leave out a single detail, no matter how insignificant it seems." For the next half hour, Landon recounted the story. Evelyn Reed listened with intense, unwavering focus, her eyes never leaving his. She didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions, just let him speak. Mr. Davies, meanwhile, typed silently and furiously on a tablet. Landon had never felt so thoroughly listened to in his entire life. When he finally got to the meeting at the school and the scheduled home visit, Evelyn held up a hand. "That's all I need for now," she said. She turned to her associate. "Davies, you have the case number. Get on the phone with the Department of Child and Family Services. Inform Miss Albright that all further communication will go through this office." The home visit scheduled for this afternoon is postponed indefinitely. We will schedule a formal meeting at our offices at a time of our choosing and draft the petition to the family court to unseal the anonymous complaint on the grounds of malicious intent and harassment. Right away, Evelyn, Davies said, already stepping into the hallway to make the call. Evelyn turned back to Landon. Mr. Grant, from this moment on, you do not speak to Ms. Albright or anyone from her department. If they contact you, you will refer them to me. You will not worry. You will focus on taking care of your daughter. Let us handle the war. The certainty in her voice was absolute, a granite wall of reassurance. In her office, Genevieve was waging her own war. She had her legal team on a fence, but that wasn't enough. She needed leverage. She was on a secure line with a man named Corbin, her private investigator, a man who was more ghost than PI, whose specialty was finding secrets that powerful men believed were buried forever. I want everything you can find on Donovan Blackwood, she said, her voice cold. I'm not interested in his corporate financials. I want his personal life. I want every affair, every back alley deal, every disgruntled ex-employee, every skeleton he has ever put in a closet. I want the things his own lawyers don't know about. I am sending you an unlimited budget. I want the result, Corbin. And I want it yesterday. After she hung up, she walked over to the small, private sitting area attached to her office. Cody was there, sitting on a couch with a tablet, engrossed in a colorful building game. Following Landon's advice, she didn't say anything. She just picked up a market report and sat down in the armchair opposite him, immersing herself in the silence of the room. After a few minutes, Cody looked up from his screen. You're building it wrong, he said. What? Genevieve asked, startled. He pointed to her report. Your building. The foundation is too small for that height. It'll fall over. He then turned the tablet around to show her his own creation, a complex, soaring tower. See? You need a wider base. Genevieve looked from the numbers on her page to the vibrant, logical structure on his screen, and for the first time, she smiled. A real, genuine smile. This was what she was fighting for. Donovan Blackwood was in a board meeting when his personal phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. It was his lawyer. He excused himself and took the call in the hallway. We have a problem, his lawyer said, his voice tense. I just got a call from a man named Davies, an associate at Reed & Harding. He informed me that his firm is now representing Landon Grant. Donovan felt a jolt of surprise. Reed & Harding? That's Genevieve's firm. Her personal firm, yes. Evelyn Reed herself is lead counsel. They've formally postponed the CPS visit and are filing a petition to unmask the anonymous reporter. They're calling it malicious harassment. The surprise curdled into white-hot fury. He had thought this would be simple. He'd swat the waiter, and the splatter would hit Genevieve. He never imagined she would deploy her most elite legal weapons to protect a nobody. She was calling his bluff and raising him. Fine, Donovan snarled into the phone. So she wants to play hardball. Let's play. He hung up and immediately dialed his investigator. Ray, the whispers aren't working fast enough. I need you to accelerate the timeline. I don't want rumors anymore. I need an event. An event? Ray asked. What kind of event? I want a situation where the girl is seen as being in clear and present danger. Something that will force CPS to act immediately. Something undeniable that no lawyer can spin. Make it happen. And make it soon. He disconnected the call, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. If Genevieve Davenport wanted a war, she would get one. That evening, Landon received a call from Evelyn Reed. Miss Albright has postponed the home visit, she said, her voice calm and professional. She was, as expected, resistant, but she is aware that any further action on her part without going through us will be met with a motion for sanctions. For now, the immediate threat is neutralized. Thank you, Landon breathed, a wave of relief washing over him. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, Evelyn said. Just enjoy the quiet. We've won the first skirmish. Now we prepare for the next after the call. Landon went into Mia's room. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by her stuffed animals, creating an elaborate story. He sat down and joined her, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease for the first time in 24 hours. For now, they were safe. He had a powerful, brilliant team on his side. He allowed himself a small, fragile sliver of hope. He had no way of knowing that across the city, his enemy had just given an order that would soon turn their lives into a public, terrifying nightmare. The week that followed was a strange, deceptive calm. The legal machinery whirred silently in the background, a powerful but invisible shield. Landon threw himself into his new job with a fierce, desperate focus. He was good at it. He was a natural bridge between the sterile, data-driven world of the researchers and the messy, emotional reality of the parents. He helped rewrite informational pamphlets, simplifying complex medical jargon into language that a terrified parent in an emergency room could understand. He felt, for the first time since his wife's passing, a sense of purpose that extended beyond the four walls of his apartment. The fragile truce extended to their new, makeshift family. One sunny afternoon, Landon took Mia to their favorite park after school. He was surprised when, a few minutes later, Genevieve's black car pulled up and she got out with Cody. She was wearing slacks and a sweater, not a power suit, and she looked awkward and uncertain as she walked across the grass. "Cody wanted to see the big slide," she said, as if needing an excuse. Landon just smiled. "Glad you could make it." For an hour, they were just two parents watching their kids. They watched Mia show Cody how to pump his legs on the swings to go higher, and they saw Cody, in turn, help Mia reach the monkey bars she couldn't quite grasp. They were becoming siblings. A quiet, unspoken hope began to bloom between Landon and Genevieve. Maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. The sense of peace was an illusion. The monster was not gone. It was just waiting. From a bench on the far side of the park, Donovan Blackwood's investigator, Ray, watched the idyllic scene with professional detachment. He had been waiting for the right moment, a day when Landon seemed relaxed, his guard down. Today was that day. He saw his associate, a nondescript woman with a friendly face, take her position near the ice cream truck. He waited. His moment came when a small dog, off its leash, darted through the playground, causing a flurry of excited shrieks from the children. The dog's owner, a flustered young man, was chasing after it. Ray saw his opening. He, accidentally, stuck out his foot, tripping the young man, who went sprawling onto the grass. It was a perfect, believable distraction. Landon, being the man he was, immediately turned to help the fallen stranger. Genevieve's attention followed his. For 10 critical seconds, no one was watching the children. It was enough. The woman from the ice cream truck approached Mia with a warm smile. "Hi there," she said sweetly. "Your daddy and his friend are busy helping that man. Your daddy wanted me to give you a special treat for being so good." She held out a small, beautifully decorated cupcake with pink frosting and sprinkles. Mia, who had been drilled on the rules since she could talk, shook her head. "No, thank you. I have allergies. I can't eat food from strangers." The woman's smile didn't waver. "Oh, I know all about that. Your daddy told me. That's why this one is special. It's a magic cupcake, made with no nuts, no dairy, no soy, no eggs. It's perfectly safe. He said to tell you it was from the secret recipe." The phrase was a poisoned dart, perfectly aimed. The secret recipe was Landon's and Mia's special code for the allergy-free cookies he baked for her at home. The woman's use of it momentarily scrambled Mia's well-practiced defenses. She looked over at her dad, who was still distracted. This friendly lady knew their secret code. She must be a friend. Confused but trusting, she took the cupcake. "Thank you," she mumbled. She took one small bite. Landon had just helped the young man to his feet when he turned back. His blood ran cold. Mia was standing by the slide, chewing, a pink frosted cupcake in her hand. "Mia!" he yelled, a raw, primal terror in his voice as he sprinted toward her. Genevieve and Cody turned, their faces a mask of confusion. "Where did you get that? Spit it out, now!" Mia, startled by his tone, dropped the cupcake, her eyes filling with tears. "A lady gave it to me. She said you said it was okay. She knew our secret recipe." Landon's eyes scanned the playground wildly. The woman was gone, vanished. It was just them and the cupcake lying on the ground like a brightly colored bomb. Panic, cold and absolute, seized him. He knew the signs. He saw the first small red hives beginning to bloom on the skin around her mouth. "Genevieve, call 911, he shouted, his voice shaking as he scooped Maya into his arms. His training, the horrible muscle memory of a parent who has lived through this nightmare before, took over. He laid her down gently on the grass, his hands fumbling with the zipper of their emergency bag. Her breathing was becoming shallow, a high-pitched wheezing sound. "Daddy, it's itchy," she rasped, her small hands clawing at her throat. "I know, sweetie, I know. Daddy's here." He pulled out the EpiPen, his hands slick with sweat. He yanked off the blue safety cap. Other parents were starting to stare now, drawn by the terrifying, unfolding drama. Genevieve was on the phone, her voice sharp and clear, while a terrified Cody clung to her leg. From his bench on the far side of the park, Ray lifted his phone, the camera already recording. "This is going to be a big poke, Mia Monster, just like we practiced," Landon said, his voice a desperate, soothing chant. "It's going to make you feel all better. 1, 2, 3! He jabbed the needle into her thigh with practiced force, holding it there for the agonizing 10-second count. Mia screamed, a sound of pure pain and terror that ripped through the idyllic afternoon quiet of the park. Landon's face was a mask of anguish. To the onlookers, it was a horrific scene, a frantic, wild-eyed man stabbing his screaming child in the leg with a needle. "Somebody help!" Landon roared, pulling the needle free. He gathered Mia's wheezing, sobbing form into his arms, rocking her back and forth. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. An ambulance is coming." Ray kept filming. He zoomed in on Landon's desperate, tear-streaked face. He captured the circle of horrified, gawking parents. He captured the image of Mia, limp and struggling for breath in her father's arms. The video didn't show a hero saving his daughter. It showed a child suffering a catastrophic medical event on her father's watch. It showed chaos. It showed negligence. It was the perfect, damning, context-free footage that Donovan Blackwood had paid for. As the first distant wail of sirens reached the park, Landon held his daughter tight, his own tears mixing with hers. He looked around wildly, desperately searching for the face of the woman who had done this, but she was long gone. He was alone, surrounded by strangers, in the middle of a nightmare orchestrated by an enemy he couldn't see, his daughter's life hanging in the balance. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. Landon sat in the back of the ambulance, holding Mia's small, cool hand, his eyes locked on the rhythmic rise and fall of the oxygen mask on her face. Genevieve followed in her car, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, a terrified Cody silent in the passenger seat beside her. At the emergency room, a whirlwind of doctors and nurses swept Mia away, leaving Landon and Genevieve in the sterile white hallway, united in a new, terrifying helplessness. Finally, a doctor with tired, kind eyes emerged. "Mr. Grant? She's going to be okay." Landon's legs almost gave out from sheer relief. He leaned against the wall, covering his face with his hands. "You saved her life," the doctor said gently, administering the epinephrine that quickly was exactly the right thing to do. Another minute or two, and her throat might have closed completely. It was a severe reaction. She put a hand on his shoulder. "We're moving her up to the pediatric ward. We need to keep her overnight for observation, but the worst is over." Sitting by Mia's bedside an hour later, watching the steady rhythm of the heart monitor, Landon's relief slowly gave way to a cold, simmering rage. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate, calculated attack. The woman had known their secret code. She had known exactly what was in that cupcake. This was Donovan Blackwood's handiwork. Genevieve, who had been on the phone in the hallway, walked back into the room, her face pale but her eyes blazing with a cold fire. "Evelyn is mobilizing," she said, her voice low and tight. "And Corbin is pulling every camera feed from that park. He will find them." She looked at Mia, sleeping peacefully, and her expression hardened into something Landon had only seen once before, the look she'd had in the restaurant, right before she fired him. But this time, the fury wasn't directed at him. It was aimed at his enemy. It was aimed at hers. In her quiet, orderly office, Miss Albright, the CPS social worker, was finishing her notes for the day when her phone pinged with a new email. The subject line read, "Urgent, concerning video of child endangerment." The sender was anonymous, claiming to be a concerned citizen. She clicked the link. A shaky handheld video filled her screen. It was chaotic, hard to follow at first. It showed a public park, the sounds of children playing. Then the camera zoomed in on a man and a little girl. The girl was screaming, crying. The man, who she recognized as Landon Grant, looked frantic, his face a mask of what looked like violent rage. He was holding a needle-like object. He yelled something unintelligible, and then appeared to stab the child in the leg. The girl's screams intensified. Other people in the background were staring, their faces a mixture of shock and horror. The video ended abruptly. Miss Albright felt a cold knot of dread in her stomach. She had seen thousands of cases, but the raw violence of this video was deeply disturbing. There was no context, no explanation, just the horrifying image of a father, a screaming child, and a needle. The legal powerhouse of Reed and Harding had made her cautious, but this was visual evidence. This was the kind of thing that demanded immediate action. She forwarded the email to her supervisor with a single line. "We need to revisit the Grant case. I am recommending an emergency removal order." The video was also sent to the tip line of a local news channel. An ambitious young producer, sensing a viral story, didn't bother with fact-checking. He saw the salacious headline potential, edited the raw footage into a 30-second clip, and sent it to the evening news desk. In the quiet of Mia's hospital room, the small television mounted in the corner was murmuring the local news. Landon was telling a sleeping Mia a story when a breaking news banner flashed across the screen. Genevieve looked up from her phone. And then they saw it. The shaky, terrible footage of the park filled the screen. Landon's own face, twisted in a mask of fatherly terror, was broadcast for the world to see. The anchor's voice was grave as she read the headline that had been written to maximize outrage. "We are just receiving this disturbing video, which appears to show a frantic father in a public altercation with his young daughter at Westfield Park earlier today." Landon stared at the screen, horrified. He was watching a twisted, monstrous lie constructed from the worst moment of his life. He was no longer a father who had saved his child. He was a public spectacle, a villain in a 30-second horror movie. Before either of them could react, there was a commotion in the hallway. Landon looked out the door's small window and his blood ran cold. Miss Albright was back, and this time she had 2 uniformed police officers with her. He instinctively moved to block the doorway as she approached. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice low and shaking. "She's sick." "She's sleeping. Step aside, Mr. Grant," Ms. Albright said, her voice cold and devoid of any courtesy. She held up a document. "This is an emergency removal order signed by a family court judge less than an hour ago. Based on new and alarming evidence, we are taking Mia Grant into protective custody. New evidence." "That video?" Landon's voice cracked with disbelief. "It's a lie." "It was edited. It was taken out of context. She was having an allergic reaction. I was saving her life." "You can explain that at the hearing, Mr. Grant," one of the police officers said, his hand resting on his belt. "Right now, you need to step aside." "No," Landon said, planting his feet. "No, you can't." The officers exchanged a look and took a step forward. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Evelyn Reed, a whirlwind of controlled fury in a tailored suit, swept down the hallway, flanked by two of Corbin's broad-shouldered men. "Officers," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "Miss Albright, you appear to be acting on an order obtained under false pretenses." She held up her own phone, displaying a freshly time-stamped document. "And I have an emergency injunction, signed by Judge Miller 10 minutes ago, that challenges the legality of that order. It demands an immediate judicial review before any action can be taken. So, I suggest you all stand down." A tense standoff ensued, a silent, crackling war of wills in the hospital corridor. "This is highly irregular," Ms. Albright sputtered. "So is using an unverified, maliciously edited video to traumatize a sick child and her father," Evelyn retorted without missing a beat. Just then, the hospital's chief administrator appeared, his face grim. He had received a call from his largest donor, Genevieve Davenport, a few minutes earlier. "Officers, Miss Albright," he said, his voice firm. "This is a hospital. Whatever legal issues you have, you will not be traumatizing my patient. I will not have a child forcibly removed from her room without a direct, uncontested order from a senior judge." The stalemate was complete. After a tense call with her supervisor, Miss Albright relented, but only partially. "We'll wait for the review in the morning," she conceded through gritted teeth. "But I'm posting an officer at this door until then." Genevieve, who had been silent throughout the legal exchange, finally stepped forward. She walked directly up to Miss Albright, her eyes blazing. "You do that," she said, her voice a low, trembling roar. "You post your guard. But know this, you are not a protector. You are a weapon being used by the man who just tried to kill this child. And when this is over, I will not forget what you did here tonight." The social worker recoiled as if struck. The battle for the night was won. But as the police officer took up his silent, awkward watch in the hallway, they all knew the war was far from over. The real fight would begin at dawn. The hours before dawn were the hardest. The hospital settled into a deep, humming quiet, a silence that felt heavier and more threatening than any noise. The lone police officer sat on a chair down the hall, a reluctant sentinel in a war he didn't understand. Inside the room, Landon sat beside Mia's bed, watching her sleep. Genevieve sat in the other chair, her laptop open, a silent whirlwind of activity as she coordinated with her team. They didn't speak much, but the shared vigil forged a bond stronger than any words. Just as the first gray light of dawn touched the city skyline, Evelyn Reed arrived. She looked as if she'd slept for 8 hours in a luxury hotel, not 3 hours on a couch in her office. She brought with her the grim reality of the day ahead. "The hearing is at 9 a.m., she said, her tone all business. "Family court, Judge Hawthorne. She's tough, by the book, and has zero tolerance for courtroom theatrics. The state's attorney has already submitted Donovan's video. We're walking into a firestorm." The courtroom was a cold, intimidating chamber of dark wood and solemn flags. Landon felt small and exposed, his second-hand suit doing little to make him feel like he belonged. He sat at the defense table with Evelyn, every muscle in his body tense. Genevieve sat in the first row directly behind him, a silent, unwavering presence at his back. Judge Hawthorne entered, a stern, sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who looked like she could spot a lie from 100 paces. The proceedings began with terrifying speed. The state's attorney played the video. Projected onto a large screen, it was even worse than Landon had imagined. It was pure, context-free horror. The judge's expression hardened as she watched Mia's terrified screams and Landon's frantic, seemingly violent actions. Miss Albright was called to the stand and testified about the video and the anonymous reports, formally recommending that Mia remain in the custody of the state. It was a nightmare. Landon could feel the weight of the judge's suspicion on him. He felt like he was drowning. Then, Evelyn Reed rose to her feet. "The defense calls its first witness," she said, her voice ringing with clarity. Mr. Corbin Genevieve's investigator, a man in a plain, unassuming suit, took the stand. Mr. Corbin, Evelyn began. What is your profession? I'm a private investigator specializing in digital forensics and corporate counter-surveillance. And were you retained by Miss Genevieve Davenport to investigate a pattern of harassment directed at her employee, Mr. Landon Grant? I was. Can you tell the court what your investigation has uncovered in the last 12 hours? Certainly, Corbin said calmly. He nodded to Mr. Davies, who dimmed the courtroom lights and turned on the projector. We acquired all available security and traffic camera footage from a 6-block radius of Westfield Park during the time of the incident. A new video appeared on the screen, a multi-paneled view of the park from different angles. Corbin narrated with cool precision. At 3:15 p.m., you can see this man. He circled a figure in jogging gear on a bench. Mr. Ray Kazdan, a freelance operative. At 3:22, you see this woman enter from the opposite side. At 3:28, Mr. Kazdan stages a distraction. As Mr. Grant's attention is diverted, the woman approaches Mia Grant. The courtroom was silent, captivated. On the screen, they watched the entire sinister choreography play out. They saw the woman hand Mia the cupcake. They saw her melt back into the crowd. The woman and Mr. Kazdan leave the park via separate exits, Corbin continued, switching the view to a traffic camera from 2 blocks away. And here they are, at 3:35, getting into the same gray van, license plate registered to a shell corporation which, after tracing its ownership, we have confirmed is wholly owned by Blackwood Industries. A gasp went through the courtroom. Miss Albright looked pale, horrified. And one more thing, Corbin said, his face grim. We have financial records showing a 5-figure payment made yesterday morning from that same shell corporation to a Ms. Anya Petrova, the woman who approached Mia Grant. The payment memo reads, "For services rendered." The state's attorney was on his feet, stammering. Judge Hawthorne was staring at the screen, her face a mask of cold, controlled fury. Evelyn Reed turned to face her. "Your Honor," she said, her voice ringing with authority, "the state hasn't just been misled, it has been used as a weapon in a criminal conspiracy. This is not a child protection case. It is an attempted assault, orchestrated by Donovan Blackwood." She looked from the judge to Miss Albright, then to the stunned state's attorney. "We ask for an immediate and full dismissal of the emergency order against my client. Furthermore, we ask that this court refer all of our findings to the district attorney's office for an immediate criminal investigation into Mr. Blackwood." The judge's gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the stunned silence. "Case dismissed, with extreme prejudice," she declared, her voice filled with contempt. "And I am personally calling the district attorney. Mr. Grant, this court apologizes to you and your daughter for what you have endured." 6 months later, the scent of garlic and baking bread filled the warm, bright kitchen of a house that felt like a home. Mia and Cody, their faces dusted with flour, were laughing as they argued over who got to put the pepperoni on the homemade pizza. Landon, watching them, felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost overwhelming. The storm had passed. Donovan Blackwood had been arrested the day of the hearing. His empire had crumbled, his name now synonymous with scandal. He was awaiting trial, facing a mountain of evidence and a long prison sentence. The world had moved on, and their world had been rebuilt. "Hey," Genevieve said, coming up behind Landon and wrapping her arms around his waist. She rested her chin on his shoulder, watching their children. "The head of the Stanford research team called today. The Mia Grant is funding a new therapy trial that's showing incredible promise." "That's amazing," Landon said, turning in her arms to face her. The last 6 months had been a blur of healing, of learning, of building something new. They had bought this house together, a place with a big backyard, midway between the city and the suburbs, a place that belonged to all of them. "You did that, you know," she said softly. "Your notes, your insights. You're making a difference for thousands of kids." "We are," he corrected her gently. "We're a team." The word hung in the air, simple and true. They were a team in the foundation, in their home, in everything. Cody, no longer a quiet, withdrawn boy, was now a boisterous and protective older brother. And Mia, happy and healthy, was the bright, laughing center of their new universe. He looked at Genevieve, at this brilliant, powerful, and deeply loving woman who had stormed into his life and refused to leave. He thought of the journey, the terror, the impossible odds, and the simple act of a waiter who refused to look away. That one decision, that one moment of doing the right thing, had set off a chain reaction that had torn down a corrupt man's empire and, in its place, had built this beautiful, messy, improbable, wonderful life. He looked at his new family, their laughter filling the warm kitchen, and he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his soul, that he was the wealthiest man in the world.